Your baby just locked eyes with a complete stranger in the grocery store, and they won't look away. You're standing right there. You're their mother. You've been their whole world for 6 months, and this random person in line is getting a 40-second unblinking stare that makes everyone uncomfortable. You probably laughed it off. Babies are weird, right? But developmental neuroscientists at Yale have spent the last decade measuring exactly what's happening in your baby's brain during those stranger stares. And what they found doesn't just explain the behavior, it reveals how human intelligence actually builds itself. And the answer is going to make you see every public interaction with your baby completely differently. Let's start with the obvious theory everyone believes. Babies stare at strangers because new faces are interesting, novel stimuli, simple curiosity. Sounds logical. Sounds completely wrong. Because here's the data that breaks that theory wide open. In 2018, researchers at the University of London ran a deceptively simple experiment. They showed 4-month-old infants 2 faces on a screen, one they'd never seen before, and one they'd seen exactly 3 times in the previous week. The babies stared longer at the familiar face, not the novel one, the one they were still processing. That's not curiosity. That's unfinished cognitive work. The baby's brain was saying, "I've seen this before, but I haven't solved it yet." But here's where it flips. When they ran the same test with babies and their primary caregiver's face versus a complete stranger, the babies stared longer at the stranger. Same age, same lab, opposite result. What changed? The level of expertise the baby had already built. By 4 months old, your baby has logged roughly 2,000 hours of FaceTime with you. Your face isn't interesting anymore. It's mastered. It's downloaded. It's solved. The stranger? That face is complex, unprocessed, potentially dangerous, or potentially safe, and your baby's brain will not look away until it determines which one. Cognitive scientists call this the Goldilocks effect. Babies don't stare at things that are too simple or too complex. They stare at things that are right at the edge of what they can almost understand. That stranger's face sitting at exactly that threshold. A puzzle their brain is solving in real time, and they won't stop staring until they crack it. Now I need to tell you about an experiment that changed everything we thought we knew about infant social evaluation. Because it's not just that babies stare at strangers. It's what they're deciding about those strangers that nobody saw coming. Yale's Infant Cognition Center. Dr. Karen Wynn and her team designed what they called the helper-hinderer experiment. They showed 6-month-old babies a puppet show, a simple geometric shape, a circle with eyes, trying to climb a hill. Then 2 other shapes appear. One helps push the circle up, the other blocks it, pushes it down. After watching this 6 times, researchers offered the baby both helper and hinderer puppets to reach for. The babies chose the helper 100% of the time in initial trials. But that's not the shocking part. The shocking part is what happened when they reversed it. When they showed the baby a mean character being helped versus being hindered, the babies chose the hinderer. They wanted to see the mean character get blocked at 6 months old, before language, before socialization, before anyone taught them right and wrong. These babies were making moral judgments and choosing social allies based on observed behavior. Your baby isn't just staring at strangers to figure out what they look like. They're running a threat assessment algorithm that's older than civilization itself. Is this person safe? Are they kind? Do they help or do they harm? And they're using facial microexpressions, body language, tone of voice, and something researchers still can't fully measure to make that call. When your baby stares at someone and then suddenly reaches for them, they just pass the test. When your baby stares and then hides their face in your shoulder, that person failed, and your baby knew it in under 30 seconds. But here's where it gets even more precise, because babies don't just evaluate strangers, they evaluate how strangers treat you. Researchers at the University of Chicago ran a study in 2015 that made parents everywhere rethink every argument they'd ever had in front of their kids. They had 9-month-old infants watch as their mother interacted with two strangers. One stranger was helpful and friendly to the mother. The other was neutral or slightly dismissive. Then they offered the baby a toy from each stranger. The babies overwhelmingly refused the toy from the person who'd been rude to their mom. Not just preferred the nice person, actively rejected the rude one. Your baby is watching every social interaction you have, and they're building a map of who is friend and who is foe based on how people treat you. That long stare at the stranger isn't random. Your baby is gathering intelligence. They're learning who to trust in the social landscape they're about to spend the rest of their life navigating. Now let me tell you about the category of stranger that breaks all the rules. Because there's one type of face babies stare at longer than any other, and it's not what you think. In 2012, researchers at the University of Massachusetts showed babies' faces from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. The prediction was simple. Babies would stare longer at faces that matched their primary caregivers. If you're white, your baby stares at white faces. If you're black, your baby stares at black faces. Familiarity preference. Except that's not what happened. Babies under 3 months stared equally at all faces, regardless of race. But somewhere between 3 and 6 months, something shifted. Babies who lived in racially homogeneous environments, only ever seeing one type of face, started staring significantly longer at faces that were different. Not out of prejudice, out of deficit. Their brains were desperately trying to build category knowledge they weren't getting exposure to. The babies in diverse environments? No preference. They'd already built the neural scaffolding to process all human faces equally. Here's what that means practically. That awkward moment when your baby stares at someone who looks different from your family? That's not bias forming. That's your baby's brain screaming for data it doesn't have yet. The researchers were clear. The stare is the brain trying to prevent bias by building robust facial recognition across all human variation. The babies who don't get that exposure? By 9 months, they start showing measurable difficulty distinguishing between faces outside their familiar category. The window is that narrow. So when your baby locks onto a stranger's face in public and won't let go, they're not being rude. They're doing critical developmental work that has to happen right now, or the neural pathway closes. But there's one more layer to the stranger stare that almost nobody talks about outside academic circles. And it involves what babies do with the information after the stare ends. Researchers at the University of Washington discovered something in 2016 that reshaped our entire understanding of infant memory. They had babies watch a stranger perform a simple action, putting a toy in a box. Then they brought the baby back a week later. No stranger present, just the baby and the box and the toy. The babies who had stared longest at the stranger during the original interaction were the ones who remembered and replicated the action. The stare wasn't passive observation, it was active encoding. Your baby was burning that stranger's behavior into long-term memory. Think about what that means. Every person your baby stares at in public isn't just a face, they're a data point, a behavioral sample, a mini lesson in how humans move, act, speak, and exist in the world. Your baby is building a database of humanity one stranger stare at a time. And the quality of that database determines how well they'll navigate social situations for the rest of their life. Now, here's the warning, and yes, there is one. If you notice your baby actively avoiding eye contact with strangers, not just shy, actually turning away, becoming distressed, refusing to look even when the person is being gentle and friendly, that's not personality, that's a signal. Researchers at the University of California, San Diego tracked 1,200 infants from 6 months to 3 years. The babies who consistently avoided stranger eye contact, not occasionally, but as a pattern, showed significantly higher rates of social anxiety and attachment difficulties by age 3. Early intervention made a massive difference. The brain's social circuitry is most plastic between 6 and 18 months. What's hardwired at 3 years old was still flexible at 8 months. So if something about your baby's stranger stare pattern feels off, too much avoidance, too much distress, or on the opposite end, zero discrimination, treating every stranger exactly like a primary caregiver, trust that instinct. You've been reading your baby's face since birth. You're the expert. So the next time your baby locks eyes with a stranger in the checkout line and stares for an uncomfortably long time, remember what's actually happening. Their brain is running a full diagnostic, threat assessment, moral evaluation, data encoding. They're learning what kind, safe, trustworthy humans look like so they can find those people later when they need them. They're building the social intelligence that will determine every friendship, every relationship, every professional interaction they'll have for the next 80 years. And that stranger who's starting to feel awkward under your baby's unblinking gaze? They just became a permanent reference file in your child's developing brain. Whether they know it or not, they just helped build a human. If this changed how you see your baby's public staring, subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below. I want to know, has your baby ever stared at someone and you just knew they were making a judgment call? Because if they have, now you know the neuroscience behind it was dead accurate. And if you want to understand why babies cry the second you sit down to eat, and what that behavior reveals about time perception in the infant brain, that's the next video. And the evolutionary psychology behind it is going to make every interrupted meal make perfect sense.